The letter had been written for years, but remained hidden until that night on stage when everything changed. It was a cold November evening in London. The Roundhouse venue was packed with over 3,000 fans who had come to see Amy Winehouse perform. The lights dimmed, the crowd erupted, and Amy walked onto the stage with that signature stride, half confidence, half vulnerability. She wore a simple black dress, her beehive hair perfectly imperfect, her winged eyeliner sharp as ever. But something was different that night. Those closest to the stage noticed it immediately. Her hands were trembling. She began with, "Rehab," and the crowd sang along, every word. Then, "You know I'm no good." The energy was electric. But halfway through the third song, something unprecedented happened. Amy stopped singing. Mid-verse. The band continued for a few seconds before realizing she had gone silent. One by one, the instruments faded. The drummer looked confused. The guitarist turned around. And Amy Winehouse stood there, frozen, staring at something in her hand. It was an envelope. White, worn at the edges, with handwriting on the front that simply read, "Dad." The audience didn't know what to do. Some thought it was part of the show. Others whispered nervously. A few pulled out their phones, sensing they were witnessing something unrehearsable, something raw. Amy looked up at the crowd, her eyes glistening under the stage lights, and said in a voice barely louder than a whisper, "I need to read something. I need you all to hear this." What Amy revealed in that letter would not only change everyone in that room but would echo through music history for years to come. Subscribe now, because what happens next will break your heart and put it back together. To understand that moment, we need to go back. Back to a young girl in North London who idolized her father, Mitch Winehouse. He was a taxi driver, a jazz singer on weekends, and Amy's first hero. She would sit in the back seat of his cab, listening to him hum Sinatra and Ella Fitzgerald. Music wasn't just sound to Amy, it was the language her father taught her to speak. But when Amy was 9 years old, Mitch left. Divorce papers, separate homes, and a little girl who didn't understand why her hero wasn't coming home anymore. She wrote him letters constantly. Letters he never answered the way she needed. Letters that piled up in her journals, unsent and unread. As Amy grew, so did her talent and her pain. She channeled everything into music. The longing, the anger, the love that had nowhere to go. By the time she was 23, she was a global superstar. But fame didn't fill the void. It only made it louder. Her father tried to reconnect. He showed up to concerts, gave interviews, appeared in documentaries. But Amy felt it was never about her, it was about the spectacle she had become. The tabloids loved the drama. Amy and her father reconcile. Or, Amy shuts out her dad again. It became a circus. And in the middle of it all, there was a letter. A real one. Handwritten. Sealed. One that Amy carried with her everywhere but never sent. Her closest friends knew about it. Her manager had seen her take it out backstage, read it silently, then tuck it back into her bag. She treated that letter like it was alive. One of her backup singers later said. Like if she let it go, she'd lose a part of herself. But on that November night in London, Amy Winehouse made a decision that would shock everyone around her. She stood on that stage, envelope in hand, and did something no one expected. She opened it. Right there. In front of 3,000 strangers. Her hands shook as she unfolded the paper. The silence was deafening. Even the sound technicians held their breath. "Dear Dad," she began, her voice cracking. "I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't know if I'll ever have the courage to give it to you. But I need to say this, even if it's just to the air." The crowd was completely still. Some people were crying. Others stood frozen, unable to process what they were witnessing. Amy continued, "I used to think that if I became famous enough, successful enough, you'd see me. Really see me. Not the headlines, not the mess, not the girl everyone talks about. Just me. The girl who used to sing in your cab. The girl who thought you hung the moon." Her voice broke. She paused, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, smudging her eyeliner. The letter trembled in her grip. But I realized now that I'd been chasing something that was never about music. It was about you. About wanting you to be proud. About wanting to be enough. She looked up from the letter, tears streaming down her face, and said directly to the audience, "I wrote this 2 years ago. I've carried it everywhere. And tonight I'm letting it go." She folded the letter carefully, walked to the edge of the stage, and handed it to someone in the front row. "Give this to my father," she said. "Tell him I love him. Tell him I'm tired of pretending I don't." The person she handed it to was crying. So was half the venue. Amy turned back to the microphone, took a deep breath, and said, "Let's finish this song." The band kicked back in, and Amy sang with a rawness that hadn't been there before. Every note felt like release. Every lyric like liberation. The crowd didn't just listen, they felt it. It was no longer a performance. It was a moment of shared humanity. But here's the part no one expected, the part that changed everything. After the show, Amy didn't go to the after-party. She didn't do interviews. She sat alone in her dressing room, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her manager knocked gently and entered. "That was incredible, Amy. The whole world is going to be talking about this." But Amy didn't respond. She was looking at her phone. A message had come in. From her father. "I got the letter. I'm on my way." 20 minutes later, Mitch Winehouse arrived at the venue. Security let him through. He found Amy in her dressing room, still in her stage clothes, makeup smudged, looking smaller than she ever had. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then Mitch did something he hadn't done in years. He opened his arms. Amy walked into them and cried. Not the public tears, not the tabloid tears. Real, quiet, healing tears. "I'm sorry," Mitch whispered. "I'm so sorry I made you feel like you had to earn my love." They stayed like that for a long time. Outside, the crew was packing up equipment. Fans were still lingering, replaying the night in their minds. But inside that small dressing room, a father and daughter were finding their way back to each other. Mitch pulled back slightly, still holding Amy's shoulders, and looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. "I read every word," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Every single word. And you were right about everything. I was so focused on trying to fix things, on managing the situation, that I forgot you didn't need a manager. You needed your dad." Amy nodded, unable to speak. Mitch continued. "When I saw that letter being passed around the crowd, when someone told me you'd read it on stage, I thought I'd be angry. I thought it would feel like a betrayal. But you know what I felt instead?" He paused, tears rolling down his cheeks. "Relief. Because for the first time in years I knew exactly what you were thinking. What you were feeling. And I realized I'd been so afraid of your honesty that I'd built walls between us." The makeup artist who had been quietly waiting outside heard sobbing and knew to give them more time. Amy's guitarist sent a text to the group chat. "Don't disturb them. Something beautiful is happening." And it was. Because in that moment, Amy and Mitch weren't a pop star and her estranged father. They were just two people who loved each other and had finally found the courage to say it out loud. "I want to do better," Mitch said. "Not for the cameras. Not for the press. For you. Just for you." Amy smiled through her tears. "I want that too, Dad. I really do." They talked for 2 hours that night. About everything. About the divorce, about Amy's childhood, about the choices they'd both made. They talked about addiction, about fame, about the crushing weight of expectation. Mitch admitted he'd been terrified of losing her to the lifestyle. Amy admitted she'd been terrified that she'd already lost him years ago. When they finally emerged from the dressing room, the venue was nearly empty. Just a few crew members remained, quietly cleaning up. One of them, an older stagehand who'd worked hundreds of concerts, later said, "I've seen every kind of performance you can imagine. But what I saw that night wasn't on stage. It was watching Amy and her dad walk out together, holding hands like she was a little girl again. That was the real show." Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe and leave a comment about a moment that changed your life. The letter became legendary. The person Amy handed it to that night never gave it to Mitch directly. Instead, they scanned it, posted it online with Amy's permission, and it went viral. Millions of people read it. Millions of people saw their own pain reflected in her words. It wasn't just Amy's letter anymore. It was everyone's. But the impact went deeper than social media shares. Within days, radio hosts were reading excerpts on air, choking up mid-sentence. Therapists printed it out for their patients dealing with parental estrangement. Support groups for adult children of divorce passed it around, highlighting passages that resonated with their own experiences. The letter had become more than a celebrity moment, it had become a cultural reckoning with the complicated nature of father-daughter relationships. One woman in Manchester wrote to Amy's fan club, "I haven't spoken to my father in 12 years. After reading Amy's letter, I picked up the phone. We talked for 3 hours. Thank you for giving me the courage." The letters poured in from around the world. Tokyo, Sao Paulo, Sydney, Cape Town. Each one a testament to the universal pain of feeling unseen by a parent, and the universal hope of reconciliation. Mitch Winehouse later said in an interview, "That letter saved us. It saved me. I had been so caught up in trying to protect her, control the narrative, be the father I thought I needed to be, that I forgot to just be her dad. That night, she reminded me what mattered." He also revealed something that shocked even Amy's closest friends. After that night at the Roundhouse, Mitch wrote his own letter. A response. He gave it to Amy 3 days later, and she kept it in the same envelope as her original letter. Years later, when Mitch published excerpts in his memoir, the world finally saw what he'd written. "Dear Amy, you were 9 when I left, and I convinced myself you'd understand someday. But understanding isn't the same as healing. I thought success would prove I'd done the right thing. That if I could just make it all work out you'd forgive me. But that's not what you needed. You needed me to sit in the back seat with you, not just drive the cab. I'm sorry it took me this long to hear what you've been saying all along. I love you. Not the star. Not the headlines. You. Always you. Dad." Amy's music changed after that. Her next performances had a different energy, less tortured, more grounded. She started writing new songs, not about heartbreak, but about healing. About second chances. About the messy, complicated, beautiful act of letting people in. One unreleased track, found after her death, included the lyric, "I wrote you a letter and I set myself free / turns out forgiveness was the key / not for you, but for me." Tragically, Amy Winehouse passed away less than a year after that concert. But that night, the night she read the letter, became a defining moment in her legacy. It showed the world that behind the headlines, the struggles, the fame, there was a girl who just wanted to be loved by her father. And for one night, in front of thousands, she was. The months following that concert were some of the most peaceful Amy had experienced in years. Friends noticed the change immediately. She smiled more. Laughed easier. Started showing up to family dinners. Mitch and Amy developed a Sunday tradition. They'd meet at a small cafe in Camden, just the two of them, no entourage, no photographers. They talk about jazz, about life, about nothing and everything. Those Sundays were sacred. Mitch later wrote, "We were making up for lost time, one cappuccino at a time." Amy even started working on a new album, one she told producers would be different from anything I've done before. She described it as music from a place of wholeness, not brokenness. Only 3 tracks were completed before her death, but those who heard them said they contained a lightness that had been absent from her earlier work. One song, tentatively titled Sunday Morning, was believed to be about those cafe visits with her father. On the day Amy passed, Mitch was supposed to meet her that afternoon. He still had the letter she'd given him that night at the Roundhouse, folded carefully in his wallet. He carries it still. Mitch Winehouse still carries a copy of that letter. He's shared it in documentaries, in books, in interviews. Not to exploit his daughter's memory, but to honor it. "She taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness," he said. It's the bravest thing you can do. The envelope that Amy handed to the stranger that night now sits in a music museum in London. It's behind glass, preserved, a relic of a moment when art and life collided in the most human way possible. Visitors stand in front of it, read the words on display, and many of them cry. Because it's not just Amy's story. It's the story of anyone who's ever felt unseen, unheard, or not enough. And the legacy? Amy Winehouse didn't just leave behind incredible music. She left behind a reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is tell the truth. Even when it's terrifying. Even when it's messy. Especially then. If this story moved you, share it. Let someone know they're not alone. Subscribe for more stories that remind us what it means to be human. And remember, your voice matters. Your truth matters. Just like Amy's did. This story is a dramatized narrative inspired by true events. It is a work of fiction for entertainment purposes only.